Let's talk about the Chicago Bulls. Who's overvalued and undervalued for fantasy? What things do we need to pay attention to? Is this team good? No, we solved that part of it. But Michael Bolton, he might have more information. Mick?
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and don't forget to shake the kid's hand. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms, so give us a thumb up and a double bang. Reminder, check your emails because Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl drafts are starting tomorrow. What time? 11 a.m. Tuesday, October the 1st, Eastern Time. That's 1 a.m. for us here in Australia, Wednesday morning. But remember, it is a slow draft. You have 7 hours to pick. Put guys in your queue, set the one-pick auto draft. If you still want to get in, there are still some spots available for points leagues. We've started out the draft and stash roto format as well. So get those applications in, which you can find down below. I am also getting involved here and chucking out applications or spots for the FBI World Cup. Large field tournament. Slow drafts, 6 hours. Drafts start 14th of October for that. 14-man rosters, 3-phased competition. Prizes at the end of each phase, and there's a redraft at the end of each phase as well. This competition's been around for a few years now, for 4 years, I think, with B-Dub and the guys at FBI hosting that, Kingy and Matt Lawson, all those guys hosting this tournament. So if you want to get in, I've got spots to give away. Just go into the description on YouTube and on the audio side, and you will see the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl entries and the FBI World Cup entries. That is all there. So check it out. All right, we are here, like I said, to talk about your Chicago Bulls. So what do we need to pay attention to with this putrid, piss-poor, unbelievably badly managed, but still not the worst it's not the worst managed team in the Reinsdorf umbrella. Shout out to the 121 legends, the Chicago White Sox. This team stinks. They're bad. Have they finally lent into becoming fully bad? I guess, well, you know what? I will believe it all when I see it. They took one step by letting DeMar DeRozan go for nothing. They traded away Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. And that's sort of what they did in the offseason. So let's have a look how I think that they are going to begin the season from a starting lineup perspective. I think it's going to be Josh Giddey, Coby White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. I think that's going to be your starting group. But of course it might not be. I'm not sure whether Zach LaVine is going to be on this team. I believe that he will be to start the season, and I believe he will be healthy-ish. I don't know whether he ends the season there. And I think he's probably copping a little bit too much hate at the moment, and the contract is obviously playing a large part of that. But this is still a very weird team. They're number 11 overall pick. Matas Buzelis probably not going to start. Maybe Vuce is gone as well. Lonzo Ball allegedly is going to be returning. Ayo Dosunmu still in that bench group. A few guys that can play minutes here. So it is a team with some interesting situations and things that can go right or go wrong for us from a fantasy point of view. Let's take a look at overvalued and undervalued players. We will start where we usually do, and that is by talking about guys who I believe are undervalued. And at the moment, honestly, I think there's only one guy, and this is really only for deeper leagues. Because I just think we need to be aware of the potential for Jalen Smith to have a solid role. And the reason I put him up as undervalued because, and there's only one thing about this, it's on Yahoo, he has a rank of 275, which again would suggest to you that in a 20-team league, you don't draft him, which is insane. He probably isn't a 12-team league draftable guy unless we're talking stashability, weekly lineups, and roto. I was told that Jalen Smith wanted to leave Indiana to go to Chicago because he believed that there was a chance that he would start. Now, I don't know whether that was because he was told or thought that Vuce would be traded, or he thought he'd have a chance to actually start over Vucevic already. Smith, despite not being a particularly good on-court player, he's got a very good fantasy game because he can shoot. He hit a 3 a game in 17 minutes. He can block shots at 0.6 in 17 minutes. He shot 59 and 69. In the past, he's been better from the free throw line than 69. He grabbed 5.5 rebounds, so he's never going to be an assist player, but a scoring, blocking, three-point shooting, good percentage player is very, very good. And if he plays 28 minutes a night, then he's a very clear top 100 player. Now, there are a lot of steps to get us there. And again, realistically, I just wanted to put this out to show you that you'd have to scroll a very long way down on Yahoo to find where Jalen Smith is. I would draft Jalen Smith in 14-team leagues, and anything deeper than that, I'm not sure. Like 12s, again, it would have to be one of those scenarios where we're talking about like stashability, larger benches, weekly lineups, rotisserie. But some of you are in those leagues. You might be joining the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl draft and stash format, where we draft for I can't remember the exact number. I think it was 36 rounds, because you don't make any pickups during the year. And this is an awesome one to grab. Much earlier than 275 as well. Let's take a look at the other side of the coin. And there are some more names on this one. It is the overvalued players. And Chicago is a bigger market team who obviously been shithouse for years and years and years. So I'm a little bit surprised that there is a little bit of overfluffing of the Chicago Bulls. But there is. And there are 3 guys that appear on my list here as overvalued players for the Bulls. One of them is the man we are putting under the lens later on. And that is the man in the middle, Nikola Vucevic. I don't get this. Now, there'll be people who are watching this or listening to this and be like, Josh, you just hate Vuce as a player, which I cannot stress this to you enough. It could not be further from the truth. What I think my opinion is on Vuce is that I accurately assess where he is as a player. And I believe last season, I was absolutely bang on in terms of what his fantasy value would be, predicting that there was an outlier shooting season and that he's just not as good as he used to be. If that's hate to you, then by all means, I hate him. But I don't. I just have I think, a realistic perspective on Vuce. Now, you could make the easy argument DeMar DeRozan is gone, so Vuce is going to get more touches now, and he's going to go back to being a value player. But I would counter that by saying, yes, that's true, but LaVine and Giddey both arrive. And Vuce might lose his spot and might get traded. So therefore, an ADP of 53 on Yahoo makes no sense. To me, even though that's about the area he was last season, I think it gets worse for him. His Yahoo rank of 57 is getting there, but it's not ideal. His ADP on ESPN at 40 is pure insanity. His category rank of 47 makes no sense on ESPN. And then for points leagues, his ESPN rank is 30, which I am never touching that one with a 1,000,000-foot pole. Just not of any interest. This one might be more controversial. We're going to talk more Vuce in a sec, but I think Coby White's overvalued. Coby White was a guy that I liked to pick in the last round of drafts last season because one of my things that I'm searching through the last round, hey, is there a starting point guard who's a 30-minute high-usage player that we might take a crack at? Then yeah, that's what I like to do, and that's exactly what happened. But not only does Coby White have to deal with Zach LaVine coming back and playing next to him, we guess. White was very up and down last season. He did not dominate from a fantasy perspective. He was good, but he wasn't putting up top 30, top 40 numbers. Josh Giddey also arrives, who is going to take the ball out of Coby White's hands, and LaVine will too. Yes, LaVine and DeRozan, straight switch, right? But Giddey arrives. Lonzo Ball is allegedly playing. Now, Lonzo Ball won't play back-to-backs. He's going to be on a minute of it, but he's going to be there. So, Coby at ADP 79 with a rank of 81, it doesn't make any sense to me. On ESPN, it makes less sense. His ADP is 55, Coby White, with a rank of 69, giggity. What are we doing? Fantrax ADP, I'm not even sure that makes sense at 76. And then for points leagues, Coby White's ranked 44th for ESPN. None of that makes sense. He basically led the league in minutes, or close enough to it last season. I think he's a really good player, but I think he's going to be playing more as a 2 than as a 1. Last season, he averaged 19, 4.5, and 5 with 2.6 threes. Low steals, low blocks, low field goals, good free throws. I do not think that the path has been cleared for Coby to just do way more. He had 23 usage, and maybe that can rise, yeah. But DeRozan and LaVine is a switch out. Now, if LaVine goes and they don't replace him with anyone, it's all bits and pieces and draft picks, whatever. That will help Coby. But Caruso gone, Giddey in, is a net negative usage for the team. Giddey's a higher usage player. Caruso's a non-existent usage player. Lonzo Ball will play some minutes. So having Ball and Giddey there means when is White playing point guard? So does he even get 5.1 assists per game? Don't know. And yes, DeRozan's assists are gone, but LaVine is into the mix. And LaVine and DeRozan's assists, DeRozan had a slight edge, but it wasn't a big gap. So Coby wasn't as good as what those current ranks would suggest, or ADPs. So I don't know why we'd be thinking he's going to get better than that next season. The other one that I think is probably a little bit overrated at the moment, or overvalued, is Ayo Dosunmu. Dosunmu's ranked 119th on Yahoo, which again suggests that you would draft him and you would slot him into one of your starting positions. And I would not. In a category league, there is just no way that I would want to do that. And Dosunmu had really, really good numbers down the stretch last season. He started to put up some big numbers, and he looked a better player. I have never been a big believer in Dosunmu, but he looked really much better at the end of last season. But again, like LaVine, Giddey, Ball, when does he play these minutes? He averaged 12, 3, and 3 for the season. 50 and 81 is very good shooting from Dosunmu. Very good. Like they are really strong numbers from Ayo. The last month of the season, the last 23 games, he played 38 minutes a night, averaging 17, 3.5, and 5. He got 1.2 steals and shot 50 and 87. Like these are all top 100 numbers. Comfortably. I can't see how Dosunmu's playing 38 minutes a night down the stretch. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know how they find that playing time with Ball and Giddey and LaVine all in the mix. It doesn't seem to add up to me that he can get to that level. Now, I have actually bumped his projections up somewhat from where it was not that long ago. Maybe pushing him to 30 minutes. And maybe he plays more because that is a lot of minutes that he played for a long period of time. But he shot 40% from 3, including 47% from 3 over the last month, which is just not a realistic number to hold. And like, where do the minutes come from? When you play the 240 game, how are you finding 37 for Ayo Dosunmu in there? And the answer is, you're probably not. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL season is here, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you are watching a game, you got a hunch about something you think might happen. Well, easy to do. You jump onto the FanDuel app and you have a look at where you place your bets, the betting page, of course, that's what it is. And you take a look at the different options there, and you can see the live stats they're updating as the game's going on. You can see the play-by-play. So all the information you need to have a look at the live betting stuff is available right on your FanDuel app. So when you're sitting there and you're chatting with your mates, you're yapping it up, and you go, I think this is going to happen. You can go on there and you can check it out, use some data to back your ideas, and get your bets in. You can get started also with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The easy way to do that, of course, is just head to FanDuel.com. But also make sure that you don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, so let's take a look at if there are any breakout candidates on this team. I guess you could have discussed, or you could have thought that Dosunmu was a breakout guy. I didn't want to include him on here just because I thought, obviously playing almost 37 minutes a night for the second half of last season maybe constituted somewhat of a breakout. So I just want to talk about someone who's probably not going to get any buzz whatsoever, and that is Julian Phillips. Now, I don't know that Julian Phillips is going to play very much at all. He might not. I'm not sure where he fits in the rotation, but it is not like this team has an array of threes. Patrick Williams is more of a 4. Matas Bazalis is a 4. DeRozan was playing most of the 3 last season. I guess you could say Giddey can hold the 3. But Phillips is a second-round pick from last season who we didn't really get to see much of. But in Summer League, he was very impressive. I've heard a lot of good things about what they might be looking for him to do. He's 6'8". He only had 13 usage last season with 2 points. It's hard to judge too much of that. But there's just a few little things of athleticism that we hope the shooting comes along, and his G League numbers were encouraging. Defensively, he can bring some of that stuff as well. And it's just a name to watch. I do not expect we get a huge amount out of Julian Phillips, but in terms of like the guy, I'm not going to tell you I think Patrick Williams is breaking out, because I don't. And maybe it's Jalen Smith, but at this point, no. Phillips is just a name to pay a little bit of attention to, I think, in terms of where we might end up. What are the risks on this squad in terms of the rotation? Where do we have to be worried? What are the concerns? Well, maybe it is that there are too many point guards. Coby White was the point guard on this team last season, and then they brought in Josh Giddey. There is Ayo Dosunmu, and we get the return of Lonzo Ball. So how do they all fit together? One of us might be banking on Josh Giddey, seeing more minutes and getting 7 assists. One of us might be banking on Coby playing big minutes and having 5.5 assists. One of us might be banking on Ayo Dosunmu being a 36-minute-a-night player getting 5 assists. And one of us might be banking on Lonzo Ball playing 24 minutes and getting 6 assists. And that's just too many guys. There's too many point guards. Who's playing out of position? Who doesn't play? Don't know. Does Billy Donovan have faith in Patrick Williams? That's another question. He shouldn't, and he hasn't over previous years. The Bulls front office, for some reason, has a 5-year level of faith in him with that contract extension. And yeah, sure, you should have signed him, but for that long and that much, I don't know. But Donovan has shown absolutely no problems with just getting that garbage out of here. And when you're a top 5 overall pick and you get replaced in the lineup by Torrey Craig or Javonte Green, then it's pretty confident to me that the coach just doesn't love you that much. Williams dealing with a foot problem. He looks like he's going to be limited in training camp. Maybe he's ready for opening night, but going to be limited. He's only 23 still. He had 17 usage in 27 minutes, averaging 10 and 4 with 0.9 steals and 0.8 blocks. And 0.8 blocks is fine. 0.9 steals is a little bit low. 44 and 79 are not very strong shooting numbers. 79 is... that's not so true. 79 is fine. But we have this argument every year that it's ready for him to break out and he's going to have the opportunity to start. And he does start and he does nothing and then he loses that spot and the minutes go away. And they drafted someone who plays that position in Matas Buzelis. Now, I don't think Buzelis is going to play immediately, but it wouldn't be a stretch to me that 20 games in that Buzelis is better than Pat Williams. Maybe he's not at all, though. And it just becomes another problem position for this Bulls squad. But we'll see how much rope that we give to Williams early in the season. The other thing is, at the moment, I do expect that Vuce starts. But what if he doesn't? What if they just say, right, we actually know that we're about development here. And Vuce, you're here and you're our 20-minute-a-night backup. I would say it's way more likely that Vuce is that than a top 40 player. And then it's the LaVine trade. We've been waiting since like January for him to be dealt and no one wants him. They all consider it a negative, toxic contract, so what do? There was a report, I think LaVine said it himself, saying, yeah, I'm fine with understanding where we are as a team and we look at this squad and it's about development and I'll happily help those younger guys, whatever he said, right? Does that mean his usage goes down? Where does he sit like in that regard? So we just get a passive Zach LaVine and then we're just begging for a trade and then it opens up everything for everybody else. But what if LaVine comes in and just bees LaVine? Then everyone else suffers something. LaVine suffered that injury that he had surgery on, the foot surgery. Now, you may make arguments that he could have played through it. Maybe he could have, whatever. The obvious team wasn't going anywhere and he wanted to be out. 24 usage for LaVine only last season, but he averaged 25 and 4. He doesn't get defensive numbers and he was at 45 and 85. In the past, he actually played 77 games the year before that. He hit 2.4 threes and theoretically he can be a top 50 fantasy player. I don't think we need to look at him as that sort of a guy at this point because, you know, who knows where it's going to be? What's the usage going to be like? Is it going to spike with no DeRozan? I guess there is an outside possibility of that. You know, he's sitting with ADPs in the 70s, which feels about right, but I just don't know how they're going to approach this, the Bulls. It's a tougher one to figure out at the moment. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the guy that is going under the lens now, and that is the big man himself, Nikola Vucevic. Again, let's make this really, really clear. People think that I hate Vuce as a player, and I do not. I just think that he's washed. I just think that he's cooked. I think that what he was able to do in the past was useful, but that's not what he can do now. Look at those crafted numbers. Look at that true shooting. Look at that shooting quality. Look at the three-point attempt rate. The offensive rebound numbers are low. His creation and load and that's fine. Like he can sort of pass a little bit. You think that he can shoot, but he actually can't. He had like one outlier good shooting season. He's a strong rebounder. He is a solid enough passer, but when is he ever going to do that with LaVine and Ball and White and Giddey and Dosunmu? When are we ever going to run that offense through him? I don't think that would make any sense. Defensively, he's terrible. He doesn't get steals. He doesn't block shots. He doesn't protect the rim. He's slow. He gets in the way. He's just done, I think, Now, if you want to play him out there, you will lose a lot of games, and maybe that's what Chicago is wanting to do, because they still owe a pick to the Spurs for the sign and trade of DeMar DeRozan, who, of course, they no longer have on the team. So playing him out there would be interesting. We're going to talk more about this in a sec, but his most common play type by far was as a pick-and-roll roll man. So that makes sense. Josh Giddey's going to really run this pick-and-roll well, and their passing acumen wasn't as strong last season with White and DeRozan as the point guards, and that is true. Giddey's a better passer than both of those players. But Vuce just tends to get in the way. And what I want to show you now is that graph on the left, the headshot plot on the y-axis, it's got finishing talent in percentile and touches per game in percentile. So finishing talent is how good you are at finishing at the rim, which as a pick-and-roll roll man, you want to be able to finish at the rim. So we've got a few different heads on here. Jusuf Nurkic, Jonas Valanciunas. We've got Jalen Smith. We've got Vuce. A few different heads there. The guy out of that group who has the most touches, the most of the ball in his hands last season was Vuce. Well, the other one, at the top is John Collins. So Collins, Valanciunas, Nurkic, and Jalen Smith. Vuce is in the 90th percentile of touches per game. He's also below the 50th percentile in finishing. The only player as a big man who's a worse finisher, and Jusuf Nurkic is dreadful, who's in like the 0th percentile, it's Vuce. He's like at 37th percentile. Whereas Collins sits up there well above 80, Valanciunas is 75, and Jalen Smith is 75. And you look at the difference between where Jalen Smith is a finisher and Vuce is, and the differences in touches, where Vuce is at 90th percentile and Smith is at 40th. It's a very different type of a player. A guy that's a better finisher, who doesn't need the ball as much, who can get out of the way for players like Giddey, White, LaVine, Williams, Bozales, whoever, and protects the rim and can shoot threes. It is, I would say, inarguable that Drummond was a better player than Vuce last season. And you can make a very easy argument for what this team would need that Smith can do a better job. So I am just massively down on Vuce. And you can have a look at his Darko DPM numbers here. Look how bad the decline has been. Even starting back in like 2019, 2020, like it's just been a downhill climb. And now he is well below 0. Like he is a negative contributor. And I think that, and we saw it last season where the fantasy production caught up with the on-court stuff. And I think it's going to potentially get worse. If you look at the guys that he's similar to from a playing perspective, it's John Collins, not a high shot blocker, Wendell Carter, not a high shot blocker, Jonas Valanciunas, not a high shot blocker, Bobby Portis, not a high shot blocker. Offensive only centers. Portis is a good shooter, the others not so much. But Vuce is like going in like the 40s according to ESPN and 50s. Whereas these other guys are 100s, 110. Wendell Carter's undrafted, John Collins 120. And Vuce is, you could say, is slightly better than those guys from just a pure stat accumulation point of view. And I agree with that. That's true. But what if the actual on-court production of Vuce and the on-court play means that those minutes come back to earth quickly? I think there are real significant risks with relying upon anything that Nikola Vucevic is going to be able to provide. So therefore, I'm not going to do it. I just don't think that it's a wise investment to get into the Nikola Vucevic business unless we're talking in the 70s or 80s of a draft. And even then, there are risks. Let's take a look at some injury issues with this squad. And we've already spoken about Zach LaVine and the foot problem that was there last season. We don't really know where he's going to be heading into camp or anything like that. But let's get to actually, it's not true. He's fine heading into camp, but will anything crop up? And the trades, there's so many. We know the things with LaVine, right? Now we talk Lonzo Ball, who we have not seen play for 2+ years now. He had to have cartilage replacement, which is basically an operation and a procedure which we've never really seen have any success anywhere. And now he claims that he is ready and available and we might see him on opening night. It's fantastic for Lonzo. I'm going to wait until I see that happen before I have a level of confidence. And even if Lonzo Ball is playing, they are going to be incredibly cautious. Incredibly. He will not be playing 30 minutes a night. He will not be playing back-to-backs. He will have plenty of maintenance issues. This is like the first season back from Jonathan Isaac, where we would just get little bits and pieces here. Last time we saw Lonzo, who's only 27, he played 35 minutes a night with 17 usage. He averaged 13, 5, and 5. He hit over 3 threes a game. He gave you 1.8 steals and 0.9 blocks, which are incredible numbers for a point guard. He shot 42 and 75, and he's a top 50 fantasy guy in that role. That role does not exist anymore for Lonzo. He is not worth a flyer at the end of 12s, I don't believe. He's going to be in and out on limited minutes for who knows how long. And the role for 35 minutes is just not realistic for him to get to. It is a waste. It will burn your roster spot. I'm not talking about worrying about wasting the draft pick. But if you take him, then he sits there and he's on your IR, then someone else needs that spot and you put him on what's the point? It's about trying to find realistic pathways for somebody to return that value. And with the guys that are there, Giddey, White, Dosunmu, LaVine, where does Lonzo play enough, let alone the fact that he hasn't played in 2.5 years? And this is a replacement therapy situation for the cartilage, which has never worked and maybe may not work here. I hope that he's ready to go. He's been one of my favorite players ever in terms of what he's able to do from a fantasy perspective, but from a real life perspective too. I've loved Lonzo. But I'm not going to put any level of faith in that whatsoever. We talked Patrick Williams already, whose season ended with a foot problem last season, and it does appear that is still slightly lingering heading into the regular season. I am not considering Patrick Williams a draftable guy. It's just been too many times that we've seen him as a starter. He doesn't get minutes. He doesn't get usage. The defensive numbers wax and wane. The shooting's not on volume. And then he gets benched at some point. We just are not really going to be interested in old mate Patrick Williams. Well, I'm not going to be anyway. Maybe you are. That's up to you, then your business. Let's look at the schedule for the Bulls, because they are a team that does have a 2-game week in the fantasy playoffs. We'll start with their quality games, a low number there, 49. They've also got low number of back-to-backs, which is good for LaVine and for Williams and for Ball. They've got 14 maximum game weeks, but their playoff schedule, if you end on the week that I suggest, which is March 23rd, that first week of those playoffs is 2 games, 2, 4, and 4. Now, that is not as impactful as Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks 2 games in the finals. Because if you're getting a bye, or you're facing a weaker opponent in week 1, a 2-game situation from, who's the best Bulls player? LaVine, Vucevic, White, your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th best pick? It's fine. So this shouldn't really impact your drafting whatsoever. But a 2-game week's annoying. After that, if you finish March 30th, they go 4-4-3. Then it's 4-3-4 for Yahoo default. And then it's 4-3-4-4 for ESPN default leagues. The young guys, who is under 23 on this team that we need to pay some attention to? Well, I've already talked about one of those players, and that was Julian Phillips a little bit earlier on. But let's talk about the guy that joined this team in the trade for Alex Caruso. We can debate the value of the trade and what you think Giddey is going to do. There is a cohort of people who think that Giddey is what am I talking about? That think that Giddey is going to ball out and be an all-star. Now, to be an all-star, your team needs to usually be pretty good, or you need to be so exceptional that that passes that. I don't think any of those things apply for Josh Giddey. I don't think he's going to be that good that he bypasses the team being bad, and I don't think the team's going to be good. But when you look at the Bazemore dynasty rank, this man is 22 years of age only. Bazemore loves him from a dynasty perspective as a top 50-ish sort of guy because there are points, there are rebounds, there are assists. He improved to be an over 80% free throw guy. He shot 48 from the field. One of the things you associate with Giddey is that he can't shoot. He actually shot all right. Doesn't shoot many threes, but he played 25 minutes with 23 usage last season. That's when I talk about the swap of Caruso to Giddey. Giddey is not a low usage player. I don't think he's ever going to be a steals guy, but 0.6 blocks is not a terrible number for a point guard. He could very easily average 16, 7, 6, 0.8 steals, 0.7 blocks, 47%, 80 from the line, 1.4 threes, which is like a top 60-ish player. And when I was talking about who the Bulls' best player is this season, it could, from a fantasy point of view, it's probably Giddey. who's going in the 60s and 70s of drafts, and I think that's reasonable. And ESPN's got him down at 92 in their category rank, which I actually think is pretty good value. And I think there is some dynasty appeal there, even if I think the pendulum might have swung a little bit too far on what Giddey can be as a real-life player. And yeah, there were concerns, and he was benched plenty of times, and his playoffs stunk. But he's going to be on a bad team for a while here, and that does give him a short-term boost. Matas Buzelis also comes out in Bazemore pretty well. He's a young player with a really good block rate coming out of the G League Ignite. The shooting numbers weren't particularly strong for Buzelis, and if you're watching on YouTube, have a look at the old Producer Michael look that this guy's got going on in the Media Day photo. If you don't know who Producer Michael is, go and Google it, because that is like Producer Michael's son. What do you think about this one, eh? Yeah, it's looking really nice, huh? 6'9", power forward, played 31 minutes for the G League Ignite. That was a terrible Producer Michael accent. Yeah, baby. He just sounds like Austin Powers. 21 usage for Buzelis. 14 and 6 with 2 blocks and 1 steal rounded up. 46 and 70. If he was to play 30 minutes a night, Buzelis, I would draft him in 12-team leagues. But he's got to deal with whatever it is that Patrick Williams is to this team. If we see that Buzelis plays 30 minutes, we would add him because he can block. He got a ton of free throws in summer league. That could be actually bad because if he can't hit them, then that's terrible. And I don't think he can hit threes, even though he claims he was a good shooter in high school. Cool, let's see it. But we all know that guys coming out of the G League Ignite do tend to improve their free throw number or their 3-point numbers, heading into the NBA. So there's a little bit of appeal here. It's just not a clean path at this point to minutes. The other young guys in this team, probably less exciting. Dalen Terry was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, and he is one of the largest red flags in terms of players coming out of college. Not only was he a second-year player coming out, but he was a point guard with invisible usage, and he has been bad in the NBA. He got some minutes down the stretch for the Bulls, but my Bazemore number has him top 225 only. He's got the size of a 3, but he can't really be a guard, but he sort of ball handles. 3, 2, and 1.5 he averaged in 12 minutes. Bad free throws, bad field goals. The steal numbers, pretty good. I'll give him that. But I honestly, I would not pick up his 4th-year rookie option. I don't think he's cut out for it in the NBA. We've got Julian Phillips there, which comes out as a top 200 guy. So, yeah, some faith, and we'll see where it goes. But the frame is nice. Some of the defensive stats can be interesting for Julian Phillips. And the other guy is one of the ones that I chucked a random prediction out last season when the Bulls had some injuries. I said, hey, Adama Sanogo is going to get in here. We'll look for a 2020 game. And I don't know if he had the 2020, but he definitely grabbed 20 rebounds. Sanogo is still on a 2-way contract. But in terms of the backup center role, he's the 3rd string behind Smith and Vucevic. He averaged 4 rebounds a night in 7 minutes. He barely played last season, but he's a higher usage player who grabs rebounds at a pretty high rate. He's someone that I think will convert off that 2-way contract into a standard contract at some point and will be able to make noise as something of a backup center. I've got him top 225 in Dynasty because there are a lot of pathways or a lot of steps to get to being valuable, but we saw a little flash of it last season, and I think he's a somewhat interesting player. The big risk-reward guy with the way that I was trying to calculate these, I don't think you're going to be... I don't think you're going to be massively... Is that what we're up to? Yeah, risk-reward? I think it is. I don't think you're going to be massively surprised with it. But it is old mate Zach LaVine, whose category league variance was about 72 spots, and his points league variance was 5.9. Free throw percentage is a variable category, and you go from 87 to 82, still really good. Drops your value, then drops your scoring associated with that as well. And that's one of the things that LaVine was able to do. Plus, we don't know health, and that's not even included in this. And where the usage and all that hierarchy sits. So he's the risk-reward guy on this squad. And lastly, we look at the players who are over the hill, who begin their decline phase. We talked about this with Vuce, and I showed you that Darko graphic and showed how bad that decline has been for Vuce. So obviously, he is one of these players. I can't even remember if I put up the old Vuce stats overall from last season. In fact, I might just do it now because I didn't do it before. But LaVine is in that potential decline phase. Vuce is too, and the other one is Torrey Craig, who we don't need to talk about too much. But let's put the Vuce numbers up. He played 34 minutes with 23 usage, and the usage might hold, but 34 minutes seems like a stretch for Vuce this season. He averaged 18 and 10 with a 3 assists and 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks on 48 and 82, and all those numbers are okay. I just think he won't play 34 minutes. I just think he's going to be another liability on the court, and I think there's a risk of benching or trading. And that is why I'm just not into having Vuce on my fantasy teams if I'm taking him in the 50s. 70s, go for it. The risk there doesn't worry me as much. So if you have a look at this team, and I believe I forgot to do it for the Cavs show earlier today, so I apologize, just a sort of a summary. LaVine in round 6 or 5, probably more 6 because of uncertainty, I get it. Giddey around 6 as well, I like that. And Vuce is probably a round 7 player to me. I am just going to be out on Coby White. I think there are just too many factors against him from a category league perspective. You can go probably a little bit higher for him in points leagues, but he's more of a 90s player to me than anything else. Dosunmu, grab him late if you want. Those minutes at the end of last season are unbelievably encouraging, but how do we get there this season? And then Jalen Smith is a stashable flyer. Pat Williams is like a 14-team league guy. Buzalis is like a 16 to 18-team league player. And Lonzo's just not most likely going to be worth the hassle, unfortunately, because of all those factors we discussed earlier. Don't forget now to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button and check your emails for your Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl invites, but also click on the links down below and register for the FBI World Cup. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.